In today's lesson, we're going to look at a simple yet deceptively difficult chord progression. Now, chord sequences like this come up a lot in songs and can be a real struggle to play over freely if you don't have the right tools. My name is Jack Ruch. Welcome to my channel. Let's get into it. So this chord progression we're looking at today is a seemingly simple 3-chord progression. It's going to start with a G7 chord, then move up to A7, then C7, and then back to G. Now this might seem pretty basic because it's just a 3-chord progression and all the chords are the same quality, meaning they're all dominant chords. But there's a few tricks to playing over this progression with total confidence. To start out, we can play with a pretty simple approach just using the G major pentatonic scale. And we can stretch that scale out across the fretboard. Now this is going to work fine as long as we phrase things well. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. Now there's nothing wrong with this pentatonic approach, but if you're like me, you'll get frustrated with the limitations of this approach. And if you're stuck playing pentatonic scales, it may be a bit of a mystery how to expand on that sound. The real key to this is learning your arpeggio shapes. This is going to give you the chord tones that allow you to outline the sound of each chord in your solos. But we don't need to abandon the pentatonic scale patterns, right? The pentatonic boxes are not a prison we need to escape from, but really a launching pad. And when we add the arpeggio shapes into the mix, we get a wider array of tools we can use in our solos. So here's an example of when I take my pentatonic licks and add the arpeggios into the mix. Now the reason this arpeggio approach works so well is that these are the notes found directly inside each one of these chords. And not all of these notes fit neatly into one scale. See, we're in the key of G major, but the A7 chord and the C7 chord are not diatonic to the key. In fact, they're secondary dominant chords. And in order to play with total confidence over this chord progression without the risk of hitting any wrong notes, we have to know the chord tones that make up each one of these chords. So let's break down this arpeggio approach. Now the example I'm going to play is going to be based in this position, and we're going to use this G major chord shape, this A major chord shape, and this C major chord shape, which are all found in the same spot. Right? These basic major chord shapes are going to be the guide for our arpeggio patterns that fit in the same position. So our G7, our A7, and our C7. Right? So now I'll play through these 3 arpeggio shapes with a close-up shot, and then I'll do a very simple solo along to the backing track, just using these notes, the chord tones to these chords in this one position, to string together a very simple solo that's going to outline each one of these chords. can take this approach and move it up the fretboard through all 5 positions. If we move this up to the next position on the fretboard, we're going to have this G major chord here, this A major chord, and this C major chord. And again, these chord shapes are a guide for the arpeggio patterns found in this position. So once again, I'll play through these arpeggios close up, and then I'll string together a simple solo using just the notes from the arpeggio shapes. So now that we've got these 2 positions down, we can start combining them together to connect the dots across the fretboard. And this is how I like to practice these things as you get comfortable with each position individually. So I'm going to play a simple solo again, just using the chord tones found in the arpeggio patterns, but now connecting 2 positions together. And then the second time through the solo, I'm going to use these chord tones as a guide, but I'm going to add some chromatic in between notes to give it a little bit more musical and organic feel and liven up the phrasing a little bit. So this type of practice is something you'll want to do moving through all 5 positions on the guitar. If you look up a diagram for dominant 7th arpeggios, you can learn them all over the fretboard, and then just find how the shapes fit together over this chord progression. Then you can take the same approach and use it on any tune you're working on. So if you want the exact tabs and notation for the examples in this lesson, go check out my Patreon page and check the description for this video for all my links. Until next time, happy practicing and take care.